a nice little review there of a lot of the different things that happened in this early church persecution. And now we get to learn about kind of a big example of the people that were causing a lot of that persecution this morning. So we're going to get to jump into Nero. So Nero, well, who's Nero? Nero's mom married Emperor Claudius when Nero when Nero was 16, Claudius died, and Nero took over the Roman Empire. So this guy's mom married Claudius. He was there. Claudius died. Now Nero's an emperor now. Well, that's the first important thing is, who is he? Well, he's an emperor. Emperor Nero, and that's the kind of guy we got there on the right. Well, now we know that he's an emperor. Let's see what kind of emperor he is. So we'll go to the next one. As Nero constructed great theaters, or as emperor, Nero constructed great theaters, explored the Nile successfully. Nero was seen as a good ruler, but that changed after the death of his mother around AD 55, or 55 AD. So we can see that this guy's gone through some tough stuff. Dad died, he was ascended to the rulership, and then his mom's dead. And so he kind of started in a pretty good spot, but he's got a lot of these rough things going on, and it quickly causes a descent into not so good stuff. He got new advisors, he murdered his stepbrother Britannicus, and was called for his first treason trial and killed his political opponents. So he started off pretty good, and immediately it just all crumbled. He had this upturn, he was called into the emperor's spot, and he just immediately fell into this place where he's not a good dude. If any of you adults remember, this is also the 2008 housing crisis, in case you were wondering what this graph is. But yeah, so the immediate thing where it went up and then went right down. So we see that Nero is in this position, he's got all this authority, and he's not a good dude. Well, now we get to see why, for the sake of the church. On July 18th, 64 AD, there was a great fire in Rome that burned the city for 6 days and remained smoldering for another 4 days. It was a devastating disaster, and because Nero was so disliked, the people tried to blame him. Nero was accused of starting the fire. People thought that he went mad or that he wanted to rebuild the city as a monument to himself. Nero was declared an enemy of the public. So immediately, we've got this position where Nero's not a very liked person. He started great. He immediately descended to this place where now they're like, he's treasonous. We don't like him. He's a problem. And then the city catches on fire, and it starts burning down. And a lot of people are like, this Nero guy is crazy. He probably set fire to the city because he's crazy, or maybe because he wants to rebuild it all and be a monument to himself. They're like, this Nero dude has got to go. He's not got it all together. He's not a good emperor. He's not a good ruler. He's an enemy of the public. And if you're following along, the red things are the ones that are going to be missing in your book. So we've got to this point where Nero is in position of power. He's not liked, and he's scrambling because this terrible thing has happened, and whether he caused it or not, he's getting blamed. And so he's got to do something, or else they're going to get rid of him, and they're probably going to kill him, or they're at least going to start trying to come against him. So Nero comes up with a plan, and the plan is this. To try to save face, Nero claimed a small group of Christians started the fire. This was somewhat believable since the Christians refused to bind themselves to Caesar, but instead only to God. Their treason alone was enough to justify the organized persecution of Christians, and it is likely that Nero killed Peter and Paul. And so we have this shift. So everybody doesn't like Nero. They're blaming Nero. Nero's like, what am I going to do? He's like, I don't want to get blamed for all this stuff. I don't want to get blamed for the fire. I don't want people coming against me. So I got to blame somebody. And this is when Nero's like, I know what I'll do. I'll take the Christian people, this Christian church, which is exploding and spreading, and I'll blame them. Believe it because the Christians don't bind themselves to Caesar. They don't worship Caesar. They don't worship the gods because they worship the one true God. They talk about this guy, and they're like, we can only worship God. We're not going to worship yours. And so it's very easy to distinguish them because they've got this separation politically and religiously. And he's like, this is perfect. I can blame them. I can put the blame on them. I can make them cause all this suffering. and then I'll be okay. And this is like marking this point where it's interesting how for a lot of like history that we can see in the Bible, a lot of what you could flip this out for in the early days of the Bible is the Jewish people. You could say the Israelites. The Israelites are the people that we easily Israelites, and so we'll blame them. But now there's this shift where now that Christianity has distinguished itself, it's made it pretty clear that it's not the same thing as what the Israelites are. It's a different thing, and it's spreading. Now they are getting called out specifically. They're in this position where people are going to come against them. And so it's this shift as we start this. And we see how Nero, this is not the only time that Christians have suffered or will suffer going forward, but Nero is this big archetype. It's like if you were in church, in big church this morning, Pastor Tom talked about how there's like a bad guy that comes into the scene and does all these things, and then ultimately it's going to be saved in the end. Nero in many ways is kind of an example of that, where there's this Christian thing that God is trying to do, that Jesus has started, which is good, and then there's conflict in the middle. And right now the conflict is Nero, and he's coming against them, and he's trying to place all this stuff on them. So all that to just say, Nero steps in and immediately is coming against the Christian people. And he kills Peter and he kills Paul, and we've got on the side there, we've got the Colosseum, because Nero comes against them in the Colosseum and things like that, where he's putting Christians in and they're fighting against lions, and it's this thing where it's this spectacle, and it becomes all of this thing where it's like we're focusing on them and we're doing things against them. So, what do we get next? Boom. So in the face of political upheaval, Nero ran and hid until upon being almost captured, he had a servant kill him. And as the horseman tried to stop the bleeding, he said, "Too late. This is fidelity." And he died in 68 AD. So we see he came to power, did all these terrible things. He persecuted the Christians. He came against them in many ways. He placed them in colosseums. He would kill them. He would torture them. He was a not great dude. And then now Nero, he's still not really liked because we see all this corruption, and the people saw this corruption. And eventually he's chased down, he's captured, he's almost captured, and then he's killed. And so Nero's got and then boom, just immediately falling. And so he dies in 68 AD. And so this is not going to be the end of the persecution of the Christian church, but this is one of the guys that is seen as this terrible Roman emperor who came very strongly against them. And so we get to this point where now there's their response. Nero's gone, and the wealthy people of Rome are celebrating. They're like, "Woo! We got rid of him. He's gone. This corrupt dude that's doing all these crazy things, he's gone. He's spending all this money." But the poor people actually ended up mourning it. For them, they were benefiting from his public programs, the luxuries, the things Nero was spending money on. And many believe that Nero faked his death, and 3 people made significant attempts to take power as Nero. So we get to this point where we get to the end, and the wealthy people are excited because he's not spending all this money anymore, and the poor people are like, "Hey, we liked him and all those things you were spending money on." And then we just get to this point where there's all these emotions, and there's all these people feeling these different ways about Nero. And ultimately we can see that Nero is this guy that came to power, and he could have had great potential, because we see later there's rulers that do incredible things to support Christianity, but instead, in an attempt to keep his own power, in an attempt to continue in the sinful ways that he was doing, he came against the Christians, and they suffered a lot. Died, and they were tortured, and it was rough. So those people we learned about in persecution, this is the side of seeing the persecutors this week.